player specifically, I really want to focus on a different player that I feel like we never talk about enough for whatever reason. I just don't feel like I ever give this guy enough attention, but it's a massive year for this player. The final year of his rookie contract. Actually, at the draft that we selected this player, I think it threw everyone off at the time. It's like, oh, okay, we're going that route here. And it's been bumpy, I would say, so far for this player that had played a ton of snaps this past year, over 500 snaps for the Lions, filled into a very important role, specifically once all of the injuries happened. And he was one of those players that were consistently on the field because you needed somebody. And that is Josh Paschal. Josh Paschal enters the final year of his contract, coming off his, you could say, his most productive season, but also the season where he played a lot. There's a lot of questions around Josh Paschal. I've even seen people bring up like, oh man, is he going to make the roster? Like the competition with guys like Ahmed now in the mix. 31 pressures this past season on the entire season. Actually, if you include the playoffs, he had 34, which is a massive jump from 13 the year before. But he didn't grade out as well. He was kind of in a similar situation to the year before, like for the impact for run defense. And you feel the impact, right? You feel positive plays, and maybe you just don't feel it enough. You just kind of feel flashes in there. You don't feel the dominance. So now there's real questions. And obviously there's a lot of hype around Ahmed. I'm not here really necessarily to say like, okay, I think he's going to make the team or he won't make the team. That's not really what this is about, because I do think he's going to make the team. Like, I don't think it's that necessarily, but this is the final chance. Like, this feels like for sure the last chance for him to make a really good impression for the Lions, earn himself potential extension with us or somewhere else. And at very least, you'd want to see him become kind of a role piece, because where he's at, as long as the Lions are healthy, it's going to be difficult seemingly for him to get a lot of snaps. He would have to be dominant in the preseason. And look, if you go back to last year's preseason, he played a lot. Lions leaned on him. They gave him a ton of reps. They wanted to see what it was going to look like. And if you remember last season, it was kind of the introduction of, hey, we're going to start using this guy on the inside a lot more. Like, we're going to try that out a little bit. And we've shuffled guys around. Levi starts playing defensive end a lot more this last season. I think those two things kind of tie together when you think about Josh Paschal heading into the final year of his contract and potential role for him, as well as Levi's ability to now play some defensive end. And those guys, how the flexibility there allows them to potentially both be able to benefit from that. But when healthy, if you look at it just from last season alone, we'll start there first. He played about 20 snaps a game up until the Aiden Hutchinson injury. Shot up to about 50-plus snaps a game for the remainder of the season. He also had 2 weeks where he was without Zadarius Smith, which was Houston right during the middle of the season, as well as Minnesota. Played the rest of the season with Zadarius Smith when he was on the field. So we saw him with a ton of different units defensively, but along a group that was getting just decimated by injuries, he was a guy that was consistently out there. And now it feels like really it is, because of the financial situation, his final chance to prove himself to be a piece here, be a piece elsewhere, but also he could just be very important for the Lions this upcoming season. Talk about the position that he's playing. We know that this past preseason, the Lions kind of leaned into, we're going to give him some reps on the interior, right? We're going to lean into that. We want to see what that's going to look like. And we thought heading into the year, like, okay, the idea was we're going to see a lot more Josh Paschal as a sub-package rusher. Now, I always thought that was going to be the case coming out of Kentucky, because you watch him on the edge. He was never a dominant rusher on the edge of Kentucky. He was very limited. There wasn't a lot of diversity, it felt like, in ways that he could actually win on the edge. So you felt kind of limited in terms of like, well, if we make him live on the outside in passing downs, I don't know how many ways he's actually going to be able to win the threat and offensive tackles. Felt like the future was ultimately going to be, hey, sub-package rusher, we'll kick him inside, and that's where we're going to get the most out of him. After the 2023 season, where I think a lot of people believe, like, oh, he took that big step, like Josh Paschal just took a big step forward, and then all that buzz died off this past year, which could be similar to what happened with DJ Reader. There was no buzz for DJ Reader this past year. He was really nice in the first few weeks. You noticed him a lot, then everything kind of gets decimated around him, and you just don't talk about him anymore. And it doesn't feel like he had that good of a season, but it's like, he's still playing pretty well, but all of a sudden there's a lot more stress on that guy when everything around you kind of falls apart. Well, for Josh Paschal, there was a lot of hype. During the season, we don't really see it at all. This is the first interesting part to this for Josh Paschal. He didn't really do much work, especially from the games that I went through. I went through about 6 games for this video, including 2023, just for 2024. And he almost never lined on the interior as a sub-package rusher, actually taking snaps this past year. He constantly was living on the edge as a rusher. You look at the injury situation when Aiden Hutchinson went down, he had 28 of his 34 pressures, for the remainder of the season. So his production did go up, and with 13 pressures, same as PFF did, 13 on the entire season. 1 sack that year, 2 hits on the quarterback, 10 hurries that season. In that season, PFF has him with 48 snaps at one defensive tackle position, and I believe it's 26 snaps at another defensive tackle position. So it's not even 100 snaps combined as an interior defensive lineman just based on alignment. So he was still playing a majority of snaps on the outside in 2023. But what's interesting is 9 of those 13 pressures that he had accounted for were marked as an interior rusher, not on the edge, which is fascinating because he's playing a small percentage of snaps there, yet a majority of his pressures actually took place when he was lined up as a defensive tackle. Interesting thing is the wins that he had on the edge were exactly what you would expect, and the wins on the interior actually found variety. When you watch him on the inside, you're like, oh, there's a little bit more. Like, I don't really notice that when he's on the outside. There's something different here. So, for example, like when he was on the inside, you would see, okay, hey, here's a bull rush win. Now, we see that on the outside a lot, but there's a bull rush, there's some speed to power, and you get to see the juice really shine off the ball. And we'll talk about that more on the edge because I think there's some differences there. Start to see some stunt wins. And it's like, okay, he can do that from outside in, right? You can loop him back inside, but you line him on the inside, there's some stunt success. I felt like this past season, a lot of it came back to he paces himself pretty well. He does have a really nice stop-start burst. I didn't feel like there was a lot of false movement as a stunt rusher, which was beneficial to him as well. Didn't feel like there was a lot of missteps. He just had a nice little burst to him. He get going pretty quickly. I didn't feel like he was overly maybe agile or laterally overly quick, but he was really good with his pacing, his setup, so he could open those opportunities and, like John Kaminsky would do, he could kind of create opportunities for others as well. So we started to see the stunt flexibility. On the edge, when you see those pressures that he's accounted for, they're all kind of the same. Like the first one was a late pass rush, just kind of late on the play, continuing to work. The quarterback, he gets noted with the pressure. The second time was another late rush opportunity where he eventually just kind of gets there. So these weren't quick wins. These were the play just kind of continues to roll along, and eventually he gets near the quarterback and makes an impact. Now, he did show a speed to power win, which is typically how he wins all the time on the edge. There was some variety this past year, which we'll talk about, but showed a speed to power win. And then on the inside, we saw a push-pull win, which is like, okay, don't see that like ever on the outside. Showed a little push-pull win because he gets on guys quickly. Showed a push-pull off of it. He also showed just a fantastic get-off win against Denver in 2023 as well. You put him back on the inside. We got to see him get an edge by doing a quick swim move, which again, we don't see a lot of that variety on the outside at all. A quick swim move, which was successful. We also saw him with a swipe move have a win on the interior as well. We see him win with speed. We saw him on the inside win with a nice little crossover move, which I really never see on the outside. Is like, hey, with my footwork, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to find ways to set guys up. On the inside, we see him win with a crossover. I don't see those things when he lined up outside the tackle. So we see a crossover win. We see first step wins. It's not the most diverse package in terms of ways to actually win on the interior, but the fact that 9 of his 13 pressures, and one of them was a screen, so typically we wouldn't chart those, but they did, so whatever. On the interior, you would think a guy's taking most of his snaps there. He was taking a very small amount of his snaps there. So it's crazy to me, but it also makes a ton of sense why the Lions' vision was like, yeah, we want to use this. Remember they told us that, like, yeah, we want to use him more on the interior, right? That's kind of the vision. But then all of a sudden you go to 2024. We're seeing into preseason, we're like, all right, he's lying on the inside, Kansas City, things like that. And he had a lot of success against Kansas City in week 1 in 2023, if you remember, on the inside. You get to 2024. Start off the season. He's not playing a lot. Plays about 20 snaps a game. And I do think that when healthy, at most, he's probably going to fall right back into that category. So he's going to have to make the most of those snaps. But as injuries began to essentially pile up, he took on a ton of snaps, but he never played on the inside. He almost exclusively just lined on the outside once the injury started to happen. 13 snaps at one defensive tackle position and 3 at another. And the crazy thing is most of those happened between the first 4 weeks of the season. First 4 weeks of the season, PFF has him with 9 snaps at a defensive tackle spot. The rest of the season, they have him with 7. That ability to continue to build on what we had seen as like, this seems like this is the process for the Lions, it was essentially thrown out the window of like, yeah, this is not going to work because we need somebody that can play on the outside because everybody's getting hurt. So he had to lean into that role. So for me, the first thing I would say to look forward to this upcoming season is getting back to allowing him to potentially get back on that path of, hey, we want to expand the variety of ways you can win. The interior is where you feel like we have the most flexibility. And I remember when Levi, it was kind of first noted like, hey, we're going to do some DN work with him. I was like, man, I actually kind of like that as a rusher because I think his skill set, the speed to power, the Lions want a pocket collapser, body control, some of the ankle flexion that he plays with, like, I actually think that's going to kind of work a little bit for him. Like, you know what he's going to do, but it's kind of going to work for him. And I think that it did, but it was alongside the fact of Josh Paschal also doing the flip side of like, hey, we're going to use him on the interior, especially with injuries early, having Aleem, having Tyleek. How fast can Tyleek get rolling? Because if Tyleek rolls quickly, you can play him next to Reader. You have the flexibility with Roy Lopez. All of a sudden, you could get a guy like Levi on the outside, opposite of Hutchinson, rotating in with those players, and that could allow some flexibility to say, hey, when we want to go sub-package, we could put you on the interior, right? Now, most of the time you would feel like, okay, you're probably going to have to then beat out Levi for snaps because like, well, Levi is also going to kick inside on sub packages, you would assume. However, again, with injuries, that may not be the case, especially early in the season, because you don't have Aleem, who typically is the other guy that eats up snaps there. So now there's almost a spot open because there's no Makai Wingo, there's no Aleem. Levi will kick inside. Hutchinson will still do both, but we've seen him kind of like, all right, this guy's going to rush on the outside. He'll probably continue to lean into that. If Davenport's out there, you can play inside and outside, but you rush him on the outside, long arm, you collapse the pocket. There is an opportunity for him to get alongside Levi and rush from the interior. There is an opportunity for him to carve out a niche role there, at least early this season of like, hey, this is something that I can offer to the table. Is like, now I can play alongside Levi, and then hopefully all those injuries don't happen where we have to rely on him even more. But that's something that's possible. 15 snaps a game. Hey, look, man, as long as you're impactful in those snaps, it'll drop your price point essentially because you'll be on the field less, you would assume, but it also makes you valuable because the Lions say there's a clear spot for you. I think that's what's important in this case with Josh Paschal. To me, it's not about him playing 900 snaps this year and being dominant. That's not going to happen. Realistically, his best path to stick around is going to be carve out a role that works. Carve out a role that works with everybody else on your team. We know Hutchinson is long-term. We know Aleem's going to be here, right? Levi's on a one-year deal. So if you can rush from the interior and Levi's going to do that too, who do the Lions keep around, right? What does that contract look like? It could end up being you, Josh. So find a role that works. This is an opportunity to potentially grab that opportunity and run with it and earn an extension here or somewhere else. But the Lions could have options there. Just going on this past season, because I just want to watch back. I see the grades. I see the production. I get it. I just want to watch it. It's like, what does it look like? Okay? Because we don't talk about him a lot. What did it look like this last year playing that many snaps? He had a 5.3% run stop rate this past season, 73rd in the NFL, so nothing outstanding there. But another interesting stat that I came across, no, Hutchinson again, wasn't healthy that much this past season. But in terms of chip percentage, PFF counting tight ends and running backs chipping pass protection, he had a 12% chip percentage, which was pretty high. He got a pretty high chip rate this past year, which I would probably assigned to one playing on the strong side of the field, working on tight ends. That just kind of naturally is going to put you on tight ends. And also potentially like, yeah, you don't really have a lot of, you don't have the other guy on the other side that needs to get the attention at this point. So you're going to get chipped. And because of that, his being at 12%, Hutchinson was at 13% on the year through a very small sample size. But just to kind of give some perspective, like when you watch him, the first thing that we always talk about with Josh Paschal, and rightfully so, is run defense. Still feel like this is the guy the Lions would like. Like if you show me this film and you're like, this guy's a free agent, you think the Lions would want him? I would think yes. Now, price point, I don't know how they'd be that high because the passer direction is just not consistent right now. But as a run defender, I'd be like, yeah, Lions would want that guy. A discipline, breaks down on the edge, plays the run with just a nasty force. And when you watch the play style, it's like, yeah, that would make sense for the Lions. The stack and shed twitch is there. He can get off blocks, even though he needs to add to that a little bit. But there is that power still to his game. There still is that edge-setting run ability that doesn't always get noticed as much. There's quick vision, recognizing run schemes, getting outside quickly. So when I start to look at some of the positives that I like with him, the first thing would be this. And this is like talking about edge and interior. First thing is the leg drive. This is one of those unique players where when you watch him, he doesn't tend to stall that often. Now, he may stall because he falls from the ground or he doesn't really string anything together, so you'll get like an initial move and then that's kind of just it. I also don't think he's that creative into entry points, which is a big problem. I think he needs to add upon that. Now, here's one potential positive people could look at, maybe look at as negative, I don't know. Body type-wise, I think Pascal is going to be very reminiscent of what our new defensive line coach has worked with in Casey Rogers. Flexibility, whether that's Anthony Nelson, whether that's Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, whether that's a guy like Logan Hall, even though he's a little bit bigger. Flexibility, side outside, I wouldn't say that long. Like Logan Hall's not that long, but neither is Pascal. But these like defensive ends that are going to set the edge against the run, play inside, outside. But pass rush wise, there's a lot of development, right? Maybe that's, hey, he needs more diversity in ways he can actually win. Maybe you need more creativity. You just need ways to string together pass rush moves, right? You just need more there in terms of production. It's a lot of raw. This is something that Casey Rogers has worked with. Now, you could say that not everyone is connected. Joe Tryon is now gone. Anthony Nelson, I think, has worked pretty well for them, but, he's been there a little bit longer. Logan Hall has gotten better year after year. Todd Bowles this past season said that, he felt like he was coming along this past year. It was just going to take some time. So, at least in terms of body type, people will probably be optimistic that, like, our guys worked with something like that before. He also did flash a little bit of a swim move, and this was against the run. He flashed some of that quickness on entry. That's one thing that's noticeable about him that I do like as a run defender. He's quick on entry. He's fast at the point of attack. He has some twitch. He has some suddenness to his game. It's just about deploying it properly. When I watch him, like, it's very noticeable. He's got a jolting, powerful knockback. He's really heavy in the lower body, super leveraged on entry. You don't really see him getting pushed backwards ever. And he does a nice job of kind of just working his inside shoulder with an explosive entry point in the upper body where he's going to pop you at the point of attack and he's going to be able to settle himself down, and he plays with active vision to work through contact. The problem for me is I don't think that he always deploys it properly. There's not always enough creativity there, and he doesn't avoid blocks as often as you would hope. Like, there's way too much of just contact. I kind of wish he'd be a little more slippery here, and he's not that slippery. His upper body flexibility is very limited, it feels like. Like, he doesn't slide out of blocks. He doesn't reduce strike zone that often as a run defender. So because of that, you don't get as much of those. You get a little bit more of like, okay, he's going to knock back and he's going to set a strong edge, but he still plays with the juice off the ball. Here was something that was super interesting to me. When I watched him early on, I was like, I don't think he's getting off the line that well. I'm a little concerned about his first step. But as more you watch, like, go against Tampa Bay, you're like, oh, this guy flying off the ball. The interesting thing about Pascal is it felt very noticeable. When it was an obvious pass down, he flew off the ball. When it was not, didn't look the same at all. I think a lot of it played back to the vision. When he's able to peek his eyes in and watch the ball at the snap, he gets off the ball. He's reactive. The problem is when he doesn't peek at the snap, he's not as reactive. He doesn't seem to feel offensive lineman getting off the ball, recognizing one player. Maybe he's reading a tight end because he's playing on that side of the formation, reads the tight end. Tight end gets off a little late. He's at the end of the line of scrimmage. He gets off a little bit late because of that as well. And his first step, his strides aren't that deep anyway. He doesn't cover that much depth anyway when he gets off the ball. And he's still not overly fast around the arc. He doesn't have some of the juice to me to, hey, if a guy sets on the inside, I can just carry this speed and turn the corner on him. One, because his bend is more average. He can knee bend, which is nice. He can actually drop his weight a little more than I thought, but he's not the fastest player around the arc. Like, it doesn't sustain to that level. So guys can kind of set on the inside a little bit if that first step isn't overly effective off the ball. But he would actually flash an ability to get off the ball on the edge, like immediately the interior, because the guy on the inside is going to, one, see the ball a lot quicker, and two, even if he doesn't see the football, he's going to be reacting to interior offensive linemen that are going to set most of the time much faster, right? They're right next to the ball. They got to set quickly. So because that they're getting off the ball a lot quicker, to see the ball consistently, it's going to lead to him getting off the ball faster. And if he's out there on obvious pass downs anyway, he's going to get off the ball faster from what we've seen. So as a pass rusher, that's something that does excite me a little bit. I like how he stays down within his pads, right, which keeps that leverage. He's a finisher. He's still an effort player. He continues to work. He plays with a super hot motor all the time. I mean, as a rusher, he just continues to work. As a run defender, he just finds the ball. He plays a very disciplined style in the sense that he doesn't leave what he sees, right? He sees the ball, he's going to continue to work that way. Now, his shed may not always play into that, but he's going to stay on top of the ball. He's going to keep it in front of him. He's going to keep eyes on what's happening in front of him. The problem is you get him out in space. On Buffalo, there was just inconsistency there. Like, he didn't have the lateral movement to, like, I'm going to set the edge and deal with this mesh point. Like, he didn't show that. So he was better off just collapsing down the C gap. And because of that, it makes someone else have to scrape outside, or a safety has to step down and fill to be that force player back inside. Because for him, he didn't show the agility to be the force player. I've seen him in space do some work. When you see him take on pullers, that thing is a thing of beauty, man. He drops his shoulder. He takes on with a pretty wide base, but a really leveraged foundation. There's a pop to it. This guy's aggressive. Not only I think the Lions like, but I also think that they need that piece, right? We want to get better against the run. I'm not saying that Josh Paschal is going to make the Lions lead against the run because he won't be on the field enough. But when you call upon him, we need depth that can stop the run. And Pascal still can do that. Now, the thing with Pascal is, again, he needs players around him to be good because Pascal, to me, doesn't make up for things. While I think that his first step is good, I don't think he's overly laterally agility. It's not great to the point where it's like, okay, I see this is a wide zone. I'm going to cut off this tight end on the backside and then make the play. You don't see that as much. Right? It's fine. It's adequate. But if anything, he's just going to get contact and drive that tight end backwards. But he's not going to step over and cross phase of linemen. That doesn't seem to be his game as often, being able to maintain that. So he's not always able to seemingly go out of his way to go make a play, go above and beyond. So it still stresses everything around him needs to do their job. He can't do others' jobs, I think, that well against the run. That and his inconsistency with shedding quickness. I think this pass rush rep kind of throws it all together here against Houston. One, you see some of the lack of fluidity in the upper body as he tries to dip and go to this rip move, and I like it. It's a little creative, kind of with the ghost, and then the way he's attacking upfield is pretty aggressive. He has some aggressive steps, but you notice that he's not really closing much ground with his stride depth, and there's just a lack of looseness and fluidity to counter off of this. You see the bend. He could drop his weight a little bit, but there's not a lot of flexibility in the upper body, and there's some lack of bend turning the corner fully here. He can be a force. He can push guys backwards, but is he going to constantly make the stop? Now, he's a really nice tackler. He's a form tackler. He doesn't really miss many tackles. When he gets hands on you, you're probably going down. How many plays are we actually going to get behind the line of scrimmage that aren't just simply effort plays? But we do see some of that tracking down from the backside. So, point is, things around him still have to work, and he can be an excellent edge setter. The posture that he plays with, it's really good into contact, and I do think that's a necessary and valuable piece, especially as Ahmed comes in. We expect him to bring that as well, but knowing what Pascal already brings, that's one thing that is consistent. Like, there's no doubt, say what you want about his pass rush, the dude's still a plus run defender. He is still a plus run defender. He does show the core strength. To me, his ability to stop and then start and just continue, it shows up as a rusher. He doesn't stall. I mean, you'll see it in like the core. He can kind of just rip guys off him. But the way that like he's able to keep driving his legs in spots where you'd think like, all right, the play's probably going to end here. Speed to power, got some jolt, but it wasn't. You didn't knock him over. It looks like it's kind of slowing down, and then he just kind of keeps going, and you're like, I don't know how he's doing that. He does a lot of that.
One thing I do like about Josh's hand usage, and I actually felt like it got better a little bit as the season went on, was getting inside tight hands. However, you're going to notice he's relatively predictable with his hand usage, and there's nothing that really gets strung together. You see the power in his hips and his core to just keep working, keep fighting, trying to find an upfield edge. There's nothing that really strings off one another or that counter move. There doesn't really seem to be any kind of counter move, but the contact balance is super noticeable, and that helps him work around the arc. It helps him collapse the pocket, but you just don't see that there's really any kind of thing strung off of another move.
Where it's like, this isn't overly pretty, but he's still kind of moving the guy backwards. The wins are just way too slow as a rusher. Like, he's getting there. It's just taking way too long to get there, which is a little bit of a problem. Noticeably, as a pass rusher specifically, the power, the entry points aren't overly twitchy, which is a problem. But more of a momentum. He kind of builds a momentum and he carries it. If you watch his arc angles, he goes really wide. Like, if he gets to a spot where a tackle is kind of set to the point where he's not going to get the edge, he's going to arc that angle way wide before he enters into contact to build speed forward. Not able to very suddenly kind of step and just boom, I'm going to explode. And he doesn't do that as much. He's a little bit more well-rounded with it, so he kind of works himself into a path to just build up speed and build up momentum and carry it into contact, which is okay, but it does make it a little bit difficult, and it makes it a little more predictable for me. I think it's a little bit predictable in an entry. Tackles have been able to kind of just anchor down and set and just wait for him there, and he doesn't feel as crafty at the top of the rush. There's not a lot of variety in terms of what he does, and there's not much string together other than I'm just going to keep kind of pushing you backwards. Not a lot of that. I saw a spin counter at one point, but it was so slow that another guard, I think, came over and took it away. A lot of shake there. He doesn't play with a lot of shake at the top of the rush. There's not a lot of creativity. Can be added to an extent. You could probably add a little bit more to that, maybe. That'll be the next step he has to take as an outside rusher. His length isn't outstanding, so his long arms aren't that clean. He doesn't actually create that much space from offensive linemen. Everything feels kind of swallowed up, and at times you do feel him get swallowed up by blocks a little bit because, like, gap and a half, again, he can kind of press guys over, but is he actually going to two gap? Can he play in a B gap, press and tackle, and roll over his hips and make the stop? Probably not. That's not his game. He doesn't carry that unbelievable length. So instead, when you see him in like those spots, he may press someone backwards, but again, he's not going to go do someone else's job. And I feel that on long arms too. They're not the most crisp. Gets into the pads with some good leverage, and he leverages his hip and he rolls through them. But the problem is he doesn't feel like he creates actually that much depth between him and an offensive lineman into those spots specifically. The agility is a little bit, it's okay, but it's not outstanding in terms of a piece that you kind of want to move laterally. And to me, that limits his shake specifically. It also hurts him at times as a stunt rusher as well. To me, he can really lose momentum when you get chip blocks towards him. This is the interesting thing. I said it's 12%. That's a high rate. When he gets chip blocks, he has a real awareness. Like, he feels it. He kind of stops and he adjusts towards it. And he kind of finds a way to still create knockback because he'll stop, he'll adjust, and then he'll drive through the chest of a lineman and he'll still kind of keep working. Problem is, it stops momentum a ton because there's not a lot of finesse to his game. So he's not able to like avoid and sink and dip and slip under a block. He doesn't really do any of that. It just kind of stops, and then he has to restart again. But his ability to restart the engine is impressive. Finish, to me, he just had some slow wins. He wasn't the quickest winner on the outside. He's just too slow to win on the outside. You'll get some flash wins where you get a guy off balance. He also has an explosive punch in his upper body where he can kind of like late create some separation, just jolt guys backwards and find a way to get to the quarterback. This guy's off balance because his get off is good enough. And he'll get on that top side shoulder and he'll keep working. He'll run through contact. He'll get his hips and he'll kind of use his hands well. He's got some explosion. There's some shock in his hands. They're just not tied together to really doing that much. It's very straightforward. A little bit of a rip through. What I like, though, is that when he gets an edge, well, he's not the most slippery player. Back to the inside aspect is when he gets an edge, he's hard to stop. He showed real contact balance on the interior, which I think is the one thing he didn't show that much on the edge, but he could deal with a shock in his chest. It didn't have to be pretty, and he would still work upfield. He's not even doing anything with his hands here, but he's still going. Or he'd get on someone's edge, and they couldn't slow him down. He would just keep rumbling forward. I remember when he came out, I called him a bowling ball. That's the guy that I wanted on the inside. I want my bowling ball rushing from the interior, especially he had a better setup. You saw it against Houston. It was just predictable on the entry. I think those things can improve. I think he could get a little more crafty. I think he could find a way to have a better setup as as a rusher. And hopefully Casey Rogers can tap into that, having guys with similar skill sets. The problem for me is, where does the snaps come from? But ultimately, we're going to need him at some point. Going to be on the field. I assume he's going to make the team. We'll see. It's still competitional because if Ahmed's amazing, depending on numbers, maybe he's not. But I think right now there's a real spot, and it's for him. It's an opportunity without guys like Aleem. It's a real opportunity for him to step in and okay, I can at least carve out a niche role and I can make this thing work. And then when you call upon me to spell a guy like Davenport, because again, Lions would be smart with Davenport, I don't think they want to play Davenport every snap. They may want to play him 70%, 65% if possible. Hutchinson probably won't play 100% every game. So there's going to be snaps to be had there on rundowns. There's going to be snaps to be had there on the edge. But he also could potentially carve out a niche role in the interior as well. I'm optimistic on Josh because I do think that while he hasn't been dominant run defender, I think what he's been is kind of what you can expect out of him. I don't know that I expect a ton more other than maybe him becoming a little bit quicker as a shed piece. I don't know that I expect a lot more there. But as a rusher, I feel like there's still some untapped things that we just haven't gotten the opportunity to see as fans. We haven't been able to see it kind of fully come together. And this may be the year it does.